All right, welcome everybody. We'll start with setting the motivation. So we'll start with the four immeasurable thoughts. We'll do them one time out loud and then just repeating them to ourselves, letting them connect. And then we'll do refuge in bodhicitta. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from desire for friends and hatred for enemies. Repeating those back to yourself, letting them connect. And then refuge in bodhicitta. Sangye churon sogi chunam lai janchu padu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyangi pe sonam ki rola penchya sangye drupa sho sangye churon sogi chunam la janchu padu dani kapsuchi Dagi chunyan gi pe sonam ki rola penchya sangye drupa sho sangye chudon sogi chunam la janchu padu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyan gi pe sonam ki rola penchya sangye drupa sho. Just letting that connect. Okay. So this session, we're going to do a few more meditations. We're going to do the continuity of mind meditation, which goes together with what we've been talking about consciousness and about impermanence. It brings these two ideas together. So before we do the meditation, just to kind of get you up to speed or get these ideas revived, the idea is that the continuity of consciousness is beginningless, that your mind has existed from beginningless time, and that time is beginningless. So we're working with these two worldviews or assumptions or theories of Buddhism that really can only be proved directly through your own experience as an advanced meditator. There's a lot that science has to say about time and about continuity and about consciousness, and a lot that quantum physics has to say. And more, these things come into alignment with what Buddhism has been saying for thousands of years and what other Vedic traditions were saying for thousands of years. So science is catching up. And if science very conclusively disproves the Buddhist worldview, we'll shift. If they make a very convincing argument with lots of proofs, we'll go with science. But so far, science is coming along with the idea that possibly consciousness is non-material and might also be beginningless. There's some really interesting, I guess, experiments and theories out there about that. And the idea that time is also beginningless is an interesting one as well, that there was something before the Big Bang. There may have been many Big Bangs coming and going, the universe expanding and contracting like a heartbeat, one theory. It's an interesting rabbit hole to go down to in terms of science, but it's kind of nice to just sit in, well, let's assume it's the case and see how that influences my everyday behavior. Is there any detriment to kind of thinking that probably the Buddha was right, because many of the things that he taught that are more direct in everyday life, I've been able to prove to myself already through my own experience. So these more esoteric concepts, I'll take it on like an educated guess type of faith, a faith based in reason, that it's probably the case as well. So grain of salt, but time is beginningless, consciousness is beginningless. That said, consciousness changes moment to moment to moment to moment. So it has this continuous continuity, but it's not static. It's not like you've had this like core of consciousness that's had an unbroken, unchanging Atman type of self. There's not like a permanent rock self with things changing around the surface of it. It's not like that. It's more like the way a river is, changing moment to moment, but you can still see the continuity of that river and name it. That makes sense? So, why do we meditate on the continuity of consciousness? It can really help us understand how this moment in our life is informed by the moments before. And basic everyday psychology would tell us this, sure, but it stops kind of at this life or stops with this family ancestral stream or epigenetics or history or, something like this. It kind of there's an end point, right? The end point might be all the way back to mitochondrial Eve in Africa, who is all of our ancestor, but we get to a stopping point when we think of the continuity of influence on this particular person you are here and now. In Buddhism, it's further back and further back and further back. And so we first just unpack the assumption that, well, if I don't remember, it can't be true. Because, of course, sometimes you don't remember breakfast. Yes, so not remembering is not proof that it didn't happen. Can you remember, 5 years ago, lunchtime, April 17th? What did you have? What were you wearing? No, probably not. You could make an educated guess. You could look back in your journal or your diary or your calendar. But, there's plenty that we don't remember just about this life. So the factor of not remembering isn't enough of a criteria to disprove this continuity of consciousness idea. Another reason why we meditate on it is it helps us understand that there may in fact have been past lives of ourself, which means what kind of future life do you want to create? You're creating it right now. Do we want to do it in a haphazard way or do we want to do it in an organized way? So looking backwards helps us look forward in a kind of more educated way, in a more strategic and efficient way. So we'll work with this continuity of consciousness idea, bringing together the idea of consciousness, clarity, and awareness, and impermanence, the fact that things change moment to moment. The other piece of all of this is that everything has a substantial cause that is of a similar type, right? So a wooden table, the substantial cause is wood, not metal. For consciousness, the substantial cause of consciousness is consciousness, the previous moment, and the previous moment, and the previous moment. There are many coactive conditions, we call them, that influence the way that mind operates, but you can't have mind coming from something other than mind. It doesn't make sense. Body, the substantial cause of the body, very easy. You learned in science class when you were a kid. The substantial cause of your body is the sperm and the egg of your parents, right? That matter, that is all very easy to understand, relatively speaking. And then the coactive conditions are like the things that you've ate and the exercise that you've had and the air that you breathe and the water that you drink, but the substantial cause is from your parents, right? So if we're thinking in those terms, then we really start to orchestrate a different kind of responsibility for our own experience. What conditions am I bringing into my mind and how do they influence its moment to moment behavior? Yeah. So there are a lot of different ideas that we can work with once we kind of establish for ourselves that the mind has continuity. Any questions before we do the meditation, or do you want to just have a go and then see if you have questions? Anything sparking right away? Good to go? Right then. Nice straight back. Straight without becoming rigid. Settle into your space. And whether you're on a chair or you're on the floor or you're on a couch, just get yourself in such a way that it really feels like your spine is in its best alignment. Making whatever adjustments you need to make. and just be a witness to your own physical experience. And let that awareness of your own body invite relaxation, alignment, balance. Just allowing whatever subtle adjustments. Becoming more grounded. And then shift your focus to the breath. And just a very gentle focus on the breath for a couple of minutes to allow surface distractions to settle. Not forcing the breath to do anything in particular. Just let the breath breathe and allow that process to capture your attention. Be with it on purpose. And thoughts will come and go, some verbal, some nonverbal, different impressions of the senses. And just decide not to follow what arises. Not drifting, just staying present with that simple focus of the breath. Like a tether to the present moment. And when the mind starts to feel more calm and quiet, and you feel relaxed and focused, create an altruistic motivation for the meditation session, like the one we started the class with. Think that you're meditating not just for your own individual, intellectual, or emotional benefit, but you're taking the time now to meditate and develop your mind to reach a state where you can benefit all beings. So you can frame that motivation into your own words. See if you can stretch it to be more than about today, more than about just yourself. And bring to mind your state of mind at some time during the day, such as before you sat down to meditate. Then follow the flow of your mind moments backward through time, earlier and earlier in the day. For example, you can start with your state of mind at breakfast this morning. Follow your consciousness backward from there, irrespective of the contents of your mind, whether thoughts or perceptions or memories or sensations. Follow the trail of your conscious process, backward through time, moment by moment, to the immediately preceding moment, and before that, and before that. Help to think in terms of chapters of the day, or eras of the week, trends of the month. Just let your focus march back through time. Not getting stuck at any section. Continue to follow your consciousness backward, observing the relationship between each conscious moment. Does each moment of consciousness exist independently of the moments before and after it? How is each mind moment related to the mind moment that came before it, to the one after it? What you're really looking for here is relation. Noticing the way pops don't just come up, some random thought, It might seem that way, but actually, these different sparks or pops, shifts in topic, random ideas are related to what came before, related to the stimuli in front of you, related to your hopes for the future. So try and notice that connection or influence that the mind has on itself. Follow your consciousness backward through time, from today to yesterday to the day before that, further and further into the past, following your conscious flow backward into last month, last year, and see if you can stretch it all the way back into childhood. Whether clear memories or general impressions, just going up the river of your mind. Observe closely how each moment of mind arises. Where does it come from? Is each moment of conscious activity linked to the previous moment or not? What seems to be the cause of each moment in that stream of moments? And trace your consciousness through your childhood into your infancy, right up to the moment of your birth. Even though you don't remember all of that, picture what it would have been, using stories from your family, using logic. With practice, you might start to actually remember these periods of your life. But if you cannot, it's sufficient to extrapolate your current experience and use your imagination about those early years. So right into infancy, being in the womb, right up to the moment of your birth. Birth from a Buddhist perspective, when the consciousness enters the sperm and egg. And then before you were conceived, before consciousness entered the sperm and egg, what was before that? You can imagine having been in the bardo, the intermediate state between lives. Before that, being embodied in a different way, in this or another realm. Just reach what might have been before you were conceived. And so you're seeing with this meditation that each moment of consciousness is part of a continuum of perceptions, emotions, of conscious activity of mind. Each moment arises from the previous moment. Given this reality, at the moment of birth, is it sensible to think that a child's consciousness simply comes into being out of nothingness? Or is there once again a previous moment of mind from which that first moment after conception arises? Just exploring that. And now dedicate any benefit you've gained from doing this meditation toward attaining a perfect state of mind where you can benefit countless beings. Okay. So that particular version was compiled by Venerable Connie, and so I'll send that to you via Bay after the class. And it's a one to try at least once by yourself. Yeah, at least once by yourself. And it really is as simple as pausing after each obvious break and really then engaging with it. So this is an analytical meditation as opposed to a single pointed meditation. but the analysis is more observational. Yeah, you don't have to come to a conclusion. You know the conclusion that Buddhism is wanting you to come to, which is that the mind is beginningless, which means you've had past lives. So then how do you adjust your behavior so you ensure positive future lives that are of benefit to all? Sure, but you don't need to rush to that conclusion. It's actually better to leave it in ambiguity and explore a little bit experientially. Um, do you have questions about that meditation or interesting things that arose? How'd it go?
Excuse me. I have I have a question. Hi, Venerable.
Hi,
Thank
Letta.
you. Um, when we say, you come back to your moment by moment, and then you see that in your life from beginningless time, you have been sometimes awake of what you do, and sometimes you were not, because
Yeah.
we know that everything is like interdependence and there's so many things, and all of a sudden, usually the meditation for me is very calm, uh, very nice, and something very not cute, but it's relaxing me, and I know where I'm going. But this time it was like all of a sudden, I say to myself, wait a minute, you are not you, because you doesn't exist. Like as everybody know that your ego and all of these things, and then what have I uh, done all of this moment of consciousness? Who knows where
Yeah, yeah. Who
I've been.
knows? Right?
And but the result, oh my goodness, and all this trauma and everything. All of a sudden I said to myself, okay, calm down.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a period of my, like, I've been taking this FPMT lessons and
Mm.
Buddhism, like 1, 2, 3, on fourth. But I think there is a part that but you don't know enough to calm yourself, but you know much more and more, and then uh,
And be
I hope next
unsettling.
time it will be.
Yeah, it can be unsettling, and it's sometimes useful to be a little unsettled. If you're getting like actively distressed, then you want to just kind of like, I'm in my body, I'm in my house, I'm fine, I can have a snack, I can have a glass of water, life is fine. If you're getting distressed, just do normal human things to soothe yourself. But being a little bit shaken, like, who am I actually? Because even if you think of just this life, have you been the same person the whole time? From a distance, it feels like yes, but then you kind of zoom in and you think, yeah, but what about the 90s? No, like you're a very different person at different developmental stages. Even as an adult, we continue to have developmental stages, right? We're changing all the time. We're also different based on who we're with. We're different based on our health, how much we've slept. And yet we have this very solid sense of identity. And it's not that there is no self, it's that there's no inherently existent self, right? There's no intrinsic self. There's no self that came out of nowhere from nothing as some sort of magic independent entity that then gathered experiences to it that then like stuck to it or something. It's not like that. It's much more like a river changing moment to moment. Sometimes the river has debris, sometimes it doesn't. But when you're thinking about the continuity of mind meditation, it's good to extrapolate a little bit that in a different context, you could have been a very different person. Right? Like if you were suddenly the leader of a nation, who would you be? If you were suddenly destitute and on the street, who would you be? If you were suddenly an animal, who would you be? With this same continuity of consciousness, but in a different brain, in a different body, in a different context. And all of that can have the side effect of broadening your empathy and your compassion, right? Kind of the presenting reason to do this meditation is to develop more conviction in past and future lives. But the side effect can be actually, we're all different given our context, but we all have very similar consciousnesses. Their clarity and awareness, but then meet with experiences and then develop certain habit energies. And actually, if I'd had the same series of lives as the person next to me, I would have wound up the same.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
fundamentally different. And then it immediately fills that affinity, empathy, compassion starts to arise quite naturally.
mhm,
So a little unsettled, a little who am I, very useful. But if it goes too far, bring yourself back to your body. Yeah.
oh, thank you.
Pinch your pinky and be like, I am here. Yes. Yeah. Leonardo, go ahead.
Hi, hello.
Hey.
Um, there were two things that happened to me during the meditation. The first one, I was going back in time, and there was a point where my son wasn't born yet, and then further on, my daughter wasn't born yet, and then like suddenly I felt like I didn't want to go back in time anymore, like as if some kind of I was kind of comfortable with them in my life, and yeah, like that happened, and then okay, I released, and the second point was when I started remembering all the mistakes I made in my life, and uh, I mean all everything wrong I did. But this time I had another perspective, as if these wrongs, they had their place in my life in a way that I could be here, uh, like because of them. Like not that they should have happened, but
Yeah,
uh, like they happened for a reason, and then uh, I'm here, and then I'm into the practice, and I'm into Buddhism and all that, and then it feels like they had this like value for happening, you know what I mean?
absolutely. Well, and it sounds like probably not wanting to go back before your children were born. You like who you are as a father, and you like the development that you've come to, and you're coming to this good chapter in your life where there's caring and there's stability and there's strength and all of these things that are really valuable. And when you do these going back in time kind of meditations, it's really common for the worst things to flare up, or the like most kind of dreamy memories, and everything is sort of sunlit and perfumed and has a perfect soundtrack or whatever. Like you either go into like the greatest hits, right? Or like the worst mistakes. And those are the ones that kind of flare up and ping as defining moments in time, defining moments of your personality. And how many millions of just boring breakfasts have you had? Like how many, moments that actually did have an influence on who you are today were the result of 1,000 tiny choices, and so you can do this kind of meditation where you're noticing the good and you're noticing the bad and you're noticing the lessons that came from both without fixating on them or giving them more power than you need to. Because what can happen is then if you start to anchor on a couple of key memories, then you pull that back into the present and say, this is who I am. But touching them, very useful, and having recognized that you learned the lesson of those moments, very useful. But it's not like we are necessarily given lessons, we choose to make them lessons. It's like give yourself more autonomy or more empowered feelings that any moment can be a lesson if you decide to make it so. Otherwise, you're kind of wandering around asking the divine to send you something, and it's too passive. And also, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are doing all they can to help you wake up, but it's still our own job as an individual. So whether you believe in a Judeo-Christian kind of creator God situation, or you believe in the Dharmakaya mind of all the Buddhas, which are not creationish, but have a divinity and omniscience to them, you've got backup, you've got support, and still it's up to you, right? And still it's up to you. So these meditations bring up all sorts of stuff. And so if you're finding that you got a bit triggered or a bit stuck, just as you were describing your own process, a bit of just a sense of release. You notice the stuck, and then almost as if it was a balloon you let into the sky, just kind of let it go if you can. And if you can't, circle back and check in with friends and family after session and workshop it. But yeah, lots of interesting things come up.
Yeah, because the point where I released was exactly like you led, like um, let me just put into words, just it was just I was it felt like I was noticing the link between the the previous moments, as if they, like, not that they had to happen, but uh, they happened, and then they made this link that led me to where I am right now, is it clear?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dana, go ahead.
Sorry, was trying to get unmuted there. Um, my question is sort of about, I don't know if you have a suggestion for like a good resource for learning more about Buddhist cosmology.
Mm.
The idea being that, okay, as beings, as sentient beings, we have our own, I guess, quote unquote, mind stream. And if it's been around since beginningless time, before the earth was formed, were beings still advanced enough to experience enlightenment? And did that then happen in a different realm? Is that the Buddhist belief? Like I just want to understand it a little better. Like I feel like I need some guideposts to make it more real
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, I mean, the shortest how did human beings happen on Earth, you can find in, I think, Birth, Intermediate State, and Rebirth by Lati Rinpoche. He talks about how before we were embodied, we were beings of light, and then we got hungry and we started eating things, and then eating things created orifices, and then we got all sort of distracted by our orifices. It's very coarse and hilarious. But so there's a short version of that in Lati Rinpoche's book. But the physical world there is a whole sort of genre of Buddhism that goes into that in quite a lot of detail. The book and the series I really like a lot is this Science and Philosophy in Indian Buddhist Classics series. It's 4 volumes. And the first one is called The Physical World, Volume 1. So this gives a lot of really good information on just kind of how we see that whole thing. Let's see if I can get you the table of contents. Here we go. Overview and methodology, systems of classification, the essential nature of physical entities, right? That will give you a good sense of things. And causes and effects. Yeah, this would get you going if you just kind of jumped around to what you're interested in. And here's where you get good explanations of how particles happen and also about time. So this Science and Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist Classics, it's got some really cool stuff. So that's my recommended reading for the night. Yeah, that's a really good series. I'm looking at the hard copy right now. It's a chunky bugger, like it's quite a big book, but it's quite interesting, and you don't have to read it cover to cover like a novel. You can jump in and out of chapters that you're curious about. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, the idea that we existed before Earth existed is kind of far out, but it's, kind of cool to think about, like, what were we up to? And there were other planets, and before there were planets, what were we up to? And, there have been Buddhas the whole time, getting enlightened. Yeah, from beginningless time, weird to say. There are Buddhas getting enlightened right this second. We may be surrounded by Buddhas, and we might be the only regular sentient being left, and they're all just collaborating to manifest in various forms to get us to wake up. right? Like your annoying neighbor and your like silly cat and your partner and your kids, they might all be Buddhas manifesting in different ways, going, wake up, right? But it's going to be according to your own karma, what you're able to see. Right, there's Buddhas on every atom, numerous as atoms, right? There's a beautiful quote like that from the King of Prayers. And yet we don't always feel it, right? We don't feel the presence of the divine, or we don't feel the being held by beings of perfect compassion, but it's because we're blocked, not because they aren't there. Yeah. So much of prayer is opening yourself up to the love that's already existing around you and through you and with you. Yeah. And it might sound like you're beseeching and requesting and invoking and inviting and asking, come, come, I need help. But really, you're asking yourself to open to the fact of that presence. Yeah, Venerable Rinchen.
Have to figure out the technology. um, when you're doing the retrograde meditation, and you come to, I came to a point where I was with my grandmother, and I was like disagreeing with her. And then I stopped and I said, you're right. I wish I'd listened. Can you have a conversation at that point, or do you just continue on back?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it could flag something kind of karmically unresolved. These kind of meditations might flag things that need to be addressed just in terms of your practice, or in terms of your purification, or in terms of how you want to relate to people who have already passed on the next time you meet each other, so that it's more in harmony, so there's more resonance, so communication is better, so you listen to each other better. So when you're in the meditation, the discipline is to stay with the meditation you've chosen to do for that time. But when you feel those little pings of, that's actually important, what's coming up, and it's unrelated to this meditation, I don't want to lose it. My own teacher, who's one of those old antique beautiful geshis, who was the abbot of Gyume, like, fancy pants sort of lama, he just has a notepad and a pencil by his desk, and he's just like, 1 minute, writes down, remember to think about this, remember to purify that, puts it down, and then goes back to his meditation. So I mean, even very advanced meditators like him have that kind of strategy for, I need to stay with the meditation I set out to do. Otherwise, I'll never build depth and continuity with it. And also, cool stuff arises and I don't want to lose it. So it's like pushing pause, write it down, and then return to the meditation.
Right.
Like that. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah, it's interesting to play with continuity of consciousness. And the other way to do this, where you're not really doing retrograde, you're just kind of watching the moment to moment unfolding of your own processes. This is another way to do it. So it's almost as if say your mental factor of attention was a little person sitting on the bank of a river, and the river was all of the rest of your main minds and mental factors, right? Just flowing and flowing. And so your little mental factor of attention is watching. Yeah, it's analyzing, it's being curious, but it's not falling into the river. It's just watching it play out moment to moment to moment. So you can also do that where you're like sort of holding still, watching flow. And what that can show you is just how much your mind changes in a short period of time. And you may have already known that, right, before you even started the meditation, but by meditating in that way, it reminds you on a deeper level, so that the next time you feel awful or you feel excited, you don't believe it in the same way. Yeah, it's like the spell is broken of permanence. We have this, we have an innate grasping ignorance, which grasps at inherent existence or intrinsic existence, but we also have an innate grasping at permanence. So there's part of us that really feels like when things are terrible, that this is the way it's always going to be, even though intellectually we totally know better. Yeah, even though your grandmother told you this too will pass and you believed her. There's still part of us that has this grasping at permanence. that when things feel awful, it feels like this heaviness, this sadness, this grief, this depression, this is going to be my life ever after. And it's simply not the case. Even if you have a sense of grief and loss, comes in waves. It feels different days and different moments. It shifts and changes all the time like water. And when you have amazing moments and things are going really, really well, you can also have that grasping at permanence arise that goes, I've got it together now, finally, at last. And you have this illusion of stability. Yeah. Or you think, actually, things going to be perfect. If I can just get this one piece sorted, life will be golden. Right? And we spend our whole life sort of moving around the chairs on the Titanic. Yeah. But it sort of feels like just one more thing and then I'll have my life together. This is grasping at permanence, where everything comes together and you think now it will be stable, and it's not. This illusion of stability being possible is part of our grasping at permanence. So if you're doing just the simplest impermanence meditation where you're just watching your own mind play out in its natural state without adding anything to it, without subtracting anything, just watching it, you notice how your thoughts are like weather. Just like when you're looking at clouds and they seem to be not moving. And then as soon as you really look at them, you see they're moving every second. Yeah. So that's a nice one to do. Just a basic impermanence meditation, watching your own mind play out. Yeah. Okay, so this time I thought we would talk a little bit about Buddha nature. So there's a classic book by His Holiness that he wrote years ago, Kindness, Clarity, and Insight. And he says in that book, the root of the ability to do this, to achieve Buddhahood, is the fact that the nature of mind is mere luminosity and knowing. Mind is something that has the capacity of appearing in the aspect of whatsoever object, through the force of the object's casting its aspect to it, and is the entity of mere clarity and cognition with a nature of experience. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's what we've been talking about, how the mind has this reflective ability. And then he goes on to say, it is said that you should not seek for Buddhahood outside yourself. The substances for the achievement of Buddhahood are within. As Maitreya says in his sublime continuum of the great vehicle, the Uttara Tantra, all beings naturally have the Buddha nature in their own continuum. We have within us this seed of purity, the essence of the one thus gone, the Tathagata Garbha. That is what is to be transformed and fully developed into Buddhahood. Okay, seed of purity. That's an interesting framing, yeah? Not original sin, but seed of purity that you've had from beginningless time. And this seed of purity is the fact that your mind has always lacked inherence, which means it has always been able to transform. So you've always had the potential for enlightenment, and that potentiality cannot be destroyed. So it's weird to talk in terms of potential because it's not actualized. But we talk about it kind of in terms of like a womb is potential space, right? Like if you think of a human being's womb, it's empty in there, but it has the potential for life. Yeah. That empty space has the potential for life. Emptiness can be akin to the womb or akin to space, which allows movement within it. Yeah, so there's a lot of different analogies for emptiness, but what we're talking about is the lack of inherence. We're not talking about nihilism. We're not talking about nothingness. We're not talking about emptying out anything. We're talking about a characteristic that all things have, and most significantly, a characteristic that our mind has. The mind lacking inherent existence is the best news there could be. Yeah, because it means that everything is workable. And so that's the ultimate nature of mind, its lack of inherent existence. The relative nature of mind is clarity and awareness. So when you're thinking about how do I become enlightened, good heavens, right? How do I become enlightened given all this knowledge? Well, you sit with, all right, well, consciousness, kind of on its own is fine. It's just that it's always had innate ignorance. or kind of a stumbly, bumbly kind of an innocence, like a small child that walks into a room and knocks things over, but doesn't mean to cause any trouble, right? But if we think of our ignorance as that kind of, it starts out somewhat benign, but then it gets reinforced, right? So again, like think of your ignorance a bit like a toddler stumbling into a room, knocking things over, and then getting mad at having knocked things over, and then hurting themselves trying to get around the things they knocked over, and then blaming all the people around them for not having looked after them properly or helping them clean up, and then the tantrum, right? That escalation process is very analogous to what happens to us in our daily life, is that we have this illusion of separateness. And we have this illusion that we ourselves are this autonomous, singular, independent little thing, which means then we become obsessed with gathering people and situations to us that seem to reinforce that and give us a sense of false safety, or push away from us things that seem to bring danger. And there's a survival instinct side of that, which we don't need to mess with per se. But the everyday unfolding of how we can feel so alienated from each other, even people that we love, we can feel so distant from. This is a symptom of this ignorance. So if we want to actualize this Buddha nature, this Buddha potential, what we need to do is first reveal it. And then we need to develop it. So they use this analogy of Buddha nature as being like a lump of perfect gold at the bottom of a garbage heap. So the lump of perfect gold is the Buddha nature that you have. And it's perfect and it's pure and it's untainted, and it doesn't matter how many layers of garbage get piled on top of it. You cannot ruin the fact that it is gold. Yeah, this is like your purity. And what we do is we're trying to purify the garbage of eons and eons of choices made under the influence of ignorance, right? Which were placing all sorts of negative karma, which give rise to all sorts of kinds of suffering. And then because we're suffering, we behave badly and create more of the same. So it goes. Yes. And so we're trying to kind of go, hey, okay, let's stop. Let's stop making it worse. And let's purify the mistakes of that and clear out the garbage and clear out the garbage. And then you get to this beautiful lump of gold that's been perfect the whole time, but it's still just a lump. Now what we want to do is to develop it and shape it into something workable for others, something that's useful for all sentient beings. Because the clean, shiny lump of gold is happy to be free of the garbage, but it's not of any particular use to anyone else. Yeah, so we would say, the analogy is like take the lump of gold, shape it into the shape of a Buddha, right? But what we're really saying is we have to develop that potentiality in such a way that we're effective to others. So the Buddhist belief is that this mind that you have right now can be developed into complete omniscience. And the mechanisms for doing that are developing positive states of mind, constructive states of mind like loving kindness, compassion, generosity, etc., just all the classics on the foundation of ethics, and to purify the mistakes you made under the influence of anger and jealousy and pride and attachment and all those negative mental factors. So those two in tandem, accumulating positive karma, purifying negative karma, means you become a Buddha, kind of like your birthright or your fundamental nature gets actualized. So Buddhahood is a process, but it's a process that we already have the potential for. We don't have to look for it anywhere else. Does that feel clear, or do you feel like pieces you want to check in about? How do you become a Buddha? Purify and accumulate. What's going to become a Buddha? This consciousness you have right now, this one. Yeah. And start dreaming about your Pure Land. My Pure Land will have many kittens and puppies, right? And irises and fresh loaves of bread. What will your Pure Land have? But the idea is that you really, like the trends of your life right now, you already attract certain kinds of people into your life and are particularly helpful to certain kinds of people, right? And other kinds of people are just not your wheelhouse. They're not your skill set. It doesn't come as easily to benefit them. When you're a Buddha, that will be heightened, although you won't have the ones you're not able to help in that same way. You'll be able to help them too. But say you're very, very good at helping friends sort out marriage difficulties, right? They're like annoyed with their spouse, and then they call you up and they say, my spouse is doing this again, and they're doing that again, and they have their whole vent and their whole whine, and you're able to really get to the root of the problem and say, you misunderstood each other here, or you had an unrealistic expectation there. And your friend goes, oh, all right. Oh, I always feel better when I talk to you. And then they're nice to their spouse, right? You might have that gift. I bet some people in the room have this gift. It could be that when you're enlightened, your particular prominent aspect is reconciliation, harmony, mediation, etc. And that when people pray to you, they activate those qualities within themselves in a more emphasized way. It's nice to think in those terms, right? Because the thing is that there are plenty of Buddhas out there, but sentient beings need you because you have specific karmic connections that the Buddhas may not have the same strength of karmic connection with. They haven't had the same amount of interaction. Yeah, so who are you becoming enlightened for? The people you keep bumping into now. Yeah, good, bad, and neutral. You know, it's interesting to explore that, but you already start to see it in your everyday life, where if you're in a good place, when you're in your most stable, your most wise, your most open, that has a ripple effect on the people around you. It has a direct benefit to them. You feel it, right? So how much more so the more your mind develops? You're not waiting until Buddhahood to be beneficial. The more peace of mind, the more happiness, the more stability you're able to stabilize within yourself, the more you're of direct benefit to others, all the way to enlightenment. Like this. Yeah. So remembering that you have Buddha nature and remembering that all sentient beings have Buddha nature, it really helps you be more careful with this consciousness you have. What habits do you want to get out of it and not inherit in your next life? Yeah, what is the legacy you want to leave your future self? Yeah, and it could be your future self of tomorrow. You don't have to think about your future life in a whole new body with a whole new name. Just, think about what's the legacy you want to leave to your tomorrow self. Then maybe you'll do the dishes, right? Because in the morning you'll be like, oh, good, the dishes are done, right? That was a nice inheritance. Yeah, but much more significant is the mental habits. Is there just ticking along in the back of your mind this habit of criticism that just picks on people and picks on situations and looks for fault and is just spotlighting all the time? And because of that, you're really discontent and unsettled. That's not something you want to gift to your future self, tomorrow's self, or 10 years from now self, or 10 lifetimes from now self. Do you want to gift that? No, that is not a gift, right? So what you do is you stand back a little bit from your habits and you ask, what is the wisdom component in that I can be respectful towards myself about? Maybe you're very good at seeing details, but then you bring anger and thwarted attachment to that, and it makes you really critical and really judgmental. So you're like, okay, criticism and judgmentalness are not useful, but I can honor the fact that I'm good at seeing details that some people miss. So it's not like you're saying, oh, I'm bad, stop doing that. That's not the strategy. You're honoring what is relevant within that habit because you came by it honest, right? It made sense to develop that skill set given your life so far and your lifetime so far. So honor the wisdom in it while then extracting the problematic portions and make them a project. Does that make sense? Right? And the baseline of this is that you believe that the mind is workable. You know that the mind changes. You've seen it change. But now you're actually saying self-directed evolution is possible. That's kind of a bold statement. Perfection is possible. That feels like a trap. But actually, what we're talking about is getting rid of what isn't actually your nature. Negative states of mind and disturbing emotions are not you. They're symptoms of suffering. They're symptoms of ignorance. And that ignorance and suffering can be removed. But the fact that you've behaved badly, don't identify with that, right? Of course you have. You are suffering. You are confused, just like everyone else. So in Buddhism, there's this delicate dance of taking responsibility without attributing fault and blame and guilt and shame. Yeah. So you're saying absolutely anger is problematic, or absolutely pride is problematic. I have those habits in my continuum and I want to get rid of them. It's very different than saying I'm an angry person and therefore I'm bad, right? That's not what we're doing, and that isn't useful. You're not an angry person. You're someone who has a strong habit of anger, right? Or you're not like a needy attached person. You're someone who has a strong habit of neediness and attachment. And all of that made sense to arise given the set of circumstances you've come into contact with so far. So when you get in this kind of sympathetic, compassionate headspace towards yourself, the result that Buddhism invites us to do is therefore practice ethics. Yeah, as an act of care. That's a really different way of approaching something like ethics. Ethics in Buddhism means refraining from harm. Yeah, refraining from harm. So you're refraining from harm because refraining from harm will stop planting seeds of negative karma on your continuum that ripen as suffering. So the first benefit of ethics is to yourself. Not harming others benefits you, right? Karmically. Not harming others benefits you relationally, right? Not harming others is a good habit pattern for your heart, etc., etc. But what you find when you're consciously in the modality of first do no harm, or really be careful about the actions of your body, speech, and mind, is that the mental factor of mindfulness is activated in a way that's really useful. And you're activating mindfulness with the agenda of staying in alignment with ethics. That makes your mind very stable, because minds that are looking for sensory stimuli and chasing the high of sensory stimuli are much more likely to become unethical, because you're sort of excusing certain behaviors. And you're saying, oh, it's okay if I do this. It doesn't hurt anyone but myself. And then you realize when you do things that hurt yourself, it limits your ability to be of benefit. Right? So say it's something very benign, like you binge on a packet of cookies, right? It only hurts me. It only hurts me binging on a packet of cookies. Well, does it though? Because then the next morning, you're going to be all stiff and headachy, and your inflammation's going to be all over the shop, and your craving's going to be all activated, and you're going to want more, and you'll be heavy and just feeling, ugh, because you ate what you aren't supposed to, right? Not because it's a moral issue, but because it's logistically not a great choice, right? 1 cookie, good. 10 cookies, bad. Why? Because you feel crap and then you're mean, right? Don't overthink it. Right? But you lie to yourself and you say, it only hurts me. Yeah. When it means that other people miss the best of you. Yeah. And so ethics going into renunciation is renunciation of suffering and the causes of suffering. It's a determination to be free from those habits that keep you stuck. So there'll be more on those ideas in future modules of Discovering Buddhism, but just to kind of like touch some of them now, because it all boils down to training the mind. You want to train the mind to do more and deeper of what is of benefit, and what is of benefit brings you joy. Yeah, and we're talking about deep benefit. Sometimes when we read the 4 immeasurable thoughts that we started the session with, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. At first we're like, well, that's lovely. Yes, indeed. Nice, Buddhist, that's a nice prayer. And then you think, wait, but some people's causes of happiness are completely problematic, right? What if some people's causes for happiness are getting really, really rich on the backs of exploiting their workers? We're not talking about that kind of happiness. We're talking about the deep happiness that comes from positive karma ripening. Positive karma ripening is the result of actions that are of benefit to all. Right. So when we say we want them to have the causes of happiness, we're really saying we want them to create positive karma. Yeah, we're not saying we want them to be really good at exploiting their workers so that they get really rich. No, not superficial happiness, deep happiness. Yeah. And free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Then you might have a niggle that says, oh, but they brought it on themselves. Maybe they need to suffer a little. Maybe that will show them a lesson. No, life's hard enough. Stuff will arise. Do not wish other people suffering, right? It's really what you're maybe getting into is wishing them to understand the experience of people undergoing hardship so that they have more empathy and compassion. And that is a fine wish. But sometimes we go a step further and be like, I wish they suffered like this, then they'd know. Right? No, I don't like that. Yeah. So when we're talking about training the mind, you really have to kind of get to be friends with yourself. But friends with yourself with such a deep self-awareness that notices those areas of resistance, even in concepts that you on the surface are on board with. Like, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, but then in the back of your mind, you're like, but not really though. Right? Like you have to notice those moments of resistance and lean into them and be curious about them. This is where you get depth. Yeah, and this is where you get spiritual maturity because you're not doing it because the person in authority said you have to. You're doing it because it was an invitation for further self-awareness and development. And so you took the invitation and you played with it and you made it your own. Yeah. Okay, so we'll do a 5-minute break and then we'll do another meditation and see if there's any questions. Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay, so we're going to do the clarity of mind meditation, which is very similar to the one we did last week. But last week we were focusing on looking at the mental factors changing and moving and responding to one another. This time we're shifting to looking mainly at the primary mental consciousness. And one of the benefits of doing this is it helps you come into contact with the fact of your Buddha nature. Yeah, that relative nature of mind. Later, you might be looking at ultimate nature of mind in more advanced meditations, but just looking at the relative nature of mind, that clarity and awareness, which is very characteristic of the main mind. There's quite a quick relief that will happen and a spaciousness that will happen that can really reassure you of your mind's own ability to change in positive ways. Excuse me. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start. So again, back to a posture that feels stable. And for a minute, just sit with an analogy of the mind. And so feel your mind reflective like a mountain lake, particularly on a calm day. Just be with that analogy. Smooth and reflective. And just watch the activity of your mind. That flow of thoughts, emotions, and sensations, judgments, and expectations. Just watch the flow. And see if you can allow yourself to merge with this clear, luminous space. That spacious, reflective quality of the main mind. Imagine your body and mind, as well as the surrounding environment, becoming one with this pure, empty space. Becoming empty, luminous, and clear, without any sense of separation or duality. Just the reflective ability of the mind, not what it's reflecting. Hold your awareness and the experience of this empty luminosity. Just that. Without thinking this or that. Without judgments or discrimination. This is just the clear, pure nature of your mind. Just rest in this space. Keep an intense but relaxed awareness. Focused without stress. Spacious, not spacey. When thoughts and emotions arise from this space, do not engage with them. Don't gravitate towards them with attraction or push them away with aversion. Simply watch them arise, abide, and dissolve back into empty spaciousness. And don't analyze the thoughts and emotions that arise, or the mind, or your experience. Just observe whatever arises with perfect neutrality. Just as the thoughts pass, bring your awareness back to the clarity of your own mind. Everything that arises, thoughts, emotions, feelings, and sensations, the experience of sound, smells, and so forth, has the nature of spacious, luminous clarity. Formless, space-like clear awareness. This is the pure nature of your consciousness. Totally relaxed. Stay with this experience with intense awareness. Just that. That's all. And dedicate. Bring to mind the motivation you established at the beginning of class. Altruism. And dedicate the understanding, the spiritual energy, and creative potential that you have generated doing this meditation to the realization of your goals, to taking the next step on your spiritual journey, for your own sake, and for the sake of all the people in your life, and all sentient beings. Okay. Well, hopefully my cough attack didn't interrupt the flow too much, but this is one that also, if you can try at least a couple times by yourself, it would be good and give you a better sense of what we're trying to do. I'll send a link to a short guided version of that with Bay, and you guys can try it in a guided way again if that's easier, or you can just read through the PDF, whichever you prefer. So these meditations, the first couple times you do them, can feel a little like what's going to happen next. But once you get into the flow with them, they can be really nourishing. So repetition is your friend. Do you have any questions before we call it a night?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned in the beginning an image of watching the river as opposed to go with the flow of the water. Is one or the other better, or does it depend on the kind of meditation we're doing?
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing and really what you want to achieve. I think, you know, a good rule for life is definitely go with the flow as much as you can. But I think sometimes we can get into like autopilot and just kind of be in the flow without examining, do we like where it's going? You know, so sometimes you need to kind of create some objectivity with your own experience and just kind of look at things unfolding, either just to see that they change, and that is useful by itself, or to see, are there habits that I need to change within that flow? So it really, yeah, it boils down to what's your main goal, I guess, of the meditation. Both are
Thank
good.
you.
They're good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
please go ahead.
I have a question, just a quick question. Is this meditation the one that Alan Wallace called like uh, wait a minute,
Sorry, the cat
he
was pulling.
says he says something like to be aware, like aware to be aware. Is this the same one? Because he named another one called the nature of the mind, and sometimes I feel that I missed one with this other one, you know?
Yeah, they wind up being quite similar. Yeah, the nature of the mind, the relative nature of the mind is this meditation. It's sometimes called clarity of mind meditation, but really what we're talking about is the relative nature of the mind. The ultimate
Because
nature of the mind is like Mahamudra meditation, and that's kind of a whole other subject. The ultimate nature of mind, but the relative nature of mind is that the other one that you described is more like open focus. Yeah, which is also very useful. So they're all useful. It's just good to know what you're doing before you start and what the goal of each one is, and then kind of reverse engineer it, you know, so really start with what is the end result I'm supposed to get from this meditation, and then you decide, oh, okay, then I'll start. Yeah, so just look at
yeah,
the
because the moment the moment you say for us to uh, watch the thoughts and emotions and everything coming and going,
Mm.
it feels like the one he called the nature of the mind. But the moment you said that we should merge with the lake, and then like stay with the quality of the reflection of the lake, it feels like the aware of being aware, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah, yeah,
it just feels
there's
like the silence.
yeah, exactly. And really, in the beginning, they're so close that it doesn't really matter. Yeah, in the beginning. Later, you might fine tune it when you get into looking at the four close placements of mindfulness. That might help. But I think at this stage, it's a good meditation if you're staying awake and present and not letting your mind get pulled into distraction. It's a bad meditation if you get distracted and then give in to it. Right, if you give in to the distraction, right? So basically, anytime you catch yourself going off on a tangent and bring yourself back at this level, then that's a good meditation. And then we just build from that skill on more and more and more. So if you can bring yourself back to some sort of spacious clarity that's not become vagued out or spaced out, it's going good. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone. We'll go ahead and dedicate the session. Janchu semcho rinpoche, ma ke panam ke gyuchi, ke panyam pa me pa yang, gone gondu pawa sho. Okay, have a good night. Thanks.
Bye, thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Urs. Thanks, Bay.
Mm.
Nice to see you all.